When I married Thomas, everyone said I was brave. Brave to marry a man with a child. Brave to step into a house where another woman's perfume still lingered on the curtains. Brave to love someone who had loved someone else, so fully, so deeply. But I didn't feel brave. I felt borrowed. From the very first day. The house was beautiful. Tall windows, warm floors, white bookshelves filled with photos. But it wasn't mine. Not really. It was hers. Julia. The name no one said too loudly, but that lived in every corner. In the piano she once played. In the garden she once planted. In the closet where one of her scarves still hung, soft and floral and forgotten, or maybe not. Sometimes I'd touch it. Just to feel how real she still was. I told myself I could make space. That people move on. That love can begin again. And for a while, I believed it. Thomas was kind, gentle, quiet, in the way men who've known real grief often are. He never compared me to her. Never made me feel like a replacement. But he also never spoke about her. And silence, I learned, can feel louder than memory. His daughter, Ella, was 6 when I met her. A sweet, shy child with big eyes and a habit of twisting her hair when she was nervous. She called me Miss Anna at first. Then just Anna. Never Mom, never Mama. And I never asked her to. That name didn't belong to me. It belonged to the woman whose picture still sat on her nightstand, smiling, golden-haired, forever young. I remember the first time I felt it. The displacement. It was our second month living together. Thomas had gone out for groceries. Ella was playing in the living room. And I was cleaning the shelves in the hallway. One shelf had a line of books, all with Julia's name written in soft cursive inside the covers. And in the middle of the row, a notebook. No title. Just J on the front. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. But I did. Not to pry. But to understand. Inside were lists. Recipes. Quotes. Thoughts. And in one corner, barely legible, "Don't forget, buy Anna lilies for her birthday. She hates roses." I froze. Anna. Not me. Another Anna. A friend, perhaps. Still, it felt like I was stepping into a life that already knew me, without needing me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table while Thomas cooked. I watched the way he chopped vegetables. The way he wiped his hands on a towel she'd probably picked out. The way he moved like he'd done this all before, just with someone else. I asked, gently, "Do you still think about her?" He didn't look up. "Every day," he said. And my heart didn't break. It sank. Because I loved a man who loved well. And that meant part of him would never be mine. I started to notice the little things. Not the dramatic ones. Not portraits or letters or tear-stained pillows. But habits. Routines. Like how Thomas always made tea at exactly 9 p.m. How he placed the mug on the left side of the bed, even before asking if I wanted any. Like how Ella whispered goodnight, "Mommy," into the dark, before turning over to sleep. She never looked at me when she said it. Never meant it for me. But it still echoed. And some nights, I whispered back. Julia had been gone 3 years when I moved in. Not long enough. Not for a child. Not for a husband. Not for a house filled with the soft weight of what once was. The neighbors still asked about her. Sometimes when I was with Ella on the porch, a woman would walk by and say, "Oh, you must be her stepmom. Julia was so lovely." I'd smile. Say thank you. Pretend I didn't see the way their eyes softened with pity. like they were watching someone take a seat that didn't belong to them. Once, I suggested redecorating the bedroom. Not much, just a paint change. Something lighter. Thomas hesitated. I don't know, he said. This was her favorite color. Was. I didn't argue. I just nodded. But that night, I stared at the pale blue walls and wondered, was this my room? Or hers, that I was simply borrowing? Ella didn't resist me. She wasn't cruel. She was gentle, sweet, quiet. But her loyalty to her mother lived in the way she guarded memories, tenderly, fiercely. If I forgot a detail Julia once loved, Ella would correct me. If I did something differently, folded her clothes the wrong way, used a different bedtime song, she would say softly, "Mommy didn't do it like that." And I would nod. Apologize. Try again. It wasn't resentment. It was protection. A child's silent promise to a mother who was no longer here. And who was I to challenge that? One evening, I found a drawer in the guest room. I was searching for tape. Instead, I found Julia's letters. Stacks of them. Tied with a ribbon. Birthday notes. Love letters. Little notes she'd written to Thomas over the years. And he'd kept them all. I didn't read them. Not fully. Just one, near the top. The handwriting was delicate. You are the calm I never knew I needed. If anything ever happens to me, promise you'll still eat strawberries. Promise you'll still sing. Promise you'll still love. I closed the drawer. Backed away. Felt tears rising before I could stop them. She hadn't haunted this house with anger. She'd haunted it with kindness. And somehow, that was worse. Later that week, I asked Thomas, if she were here, would you have still met me? He looked confused. I don't know, he said, maybe. Would you have fallen in love with me? He paused. That's not fair. I nodded. Maybe not, but it feels real. He reached for my hand. You are not a replacement. But I didn't feel held. I felt placed. I started dreaming about her. Not in a scary way. She was always just there. In the corner of the room. At the end of the hallway. Smiling. Not judging. Not angry. Just present. A woman whose shadow cast long over a life she no longer lived. I tried. God, I tried. To be soft. To be present. To be what she needed, not as a mother, but as someone safe. Ella wasn't difficult. She didn't push me away. But she also never pulled me closer. I was the person who packed her lunch, combed her hair, read her stories at night. But the person she looked for when she was scared? Still Julia. Always Julia. One night, she had a nightmare. She ran into our room, breathless, eyes wet. Thomas sat up immediately. It's okay, sweetheart, he said, pulling her in. You're safe. She clung to him, sobbing. He stroked her back, murmuring the same lullaby Julia once sang, soft and slow, like prayer. I sat beside them, unsure whether I was allowed to touch her. Ella never looked at me. Not once. And that hurt more than I expected. The next morning, I made pancakes, her favorite. She ate quietly, eyes fixed on the table. I'm sorry you had a bad dream, I said. She nodded. What was it about? She hesitated, then said, I couldn't find Mommy, she was gone. I swallowed hard. I'm here, I said gently. She looked up at me, her face serious. I know, but it wasn't you I was looking for. Later that day, I found her in her room. She was playing Tea Party, Two dolls sat carefully at the table. She was speaking in two voices, hers and someone else's. "But I missed you so much," one doll said. "I missed you too, Mommy," the other replied. I stood at the door and listened. Each word pierced. Each pause felt sacred, like I was intruding on something private. A child's grief, rehearsed, preserved. I didn't interrupt. Just stepped away. Heart aching. Because no matter how many pancakes I made, no matter how many bedtime stories I read, I was a pause between memories. Not a replacement. Not a continuation. Just space. That evening, I asked Thomas, "Does she ever talk to you about her?" He looked up from the sink. "Sometimes, less lately." I nodded. "She still talks to her, in play." He dried his hands. "She needs to, maybe she always will." "And where does that leave me?" I whispered. He walked over, took my hand. "With us, with me." But I wasn't sure what "with us" meant anymore. Because it felt like there was always a third person at the table. Invisible. But louder than both of us. I started going for long walks in the evening. It gave them space. Gave me air. Sometimes I'd walk past houses with lit up windows, mothers reading to their children, fathers dancing in kitchens. No ghost sitting between them. I envied the simplicity. The innocence of starting clean. Once, I stayed out too long. The sky had darkened, and I hadn't checked the time. When I returned, Thomas was sitting on the porch. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I lost track." He stood. "You never do." That stopped me. I'd always been the careful one. The planner. The one who made life easier for everyone else. But lately, I was slipping, forgetting things, withdrawing. I was still in the house, but less and less in myself. That night, I found a framed photo in Ella's drawer. Julia and Ella, side by side, both laughing, sun behind them. I held it for a long time. Not with jealousy. With longing. Not to be Julia. Just to have had a beginning like that. Unburdened. Untouched by shadows. One morning, I looked in the mirror and couldn't find my reflection. I mean, it was there, the face, the skin, the hair I hadn't dyed in months. But something felt off. Like the woman staring back wasn't quite anchored. Like she was slipping out of frame. Not because anyone pushed her, but because she kept stepping aside, to make room for someone who wasn't even there. That day, I told Thomas the first needed to talk. We sat on the porch, coffee in our hands, silence stretching like fog. "I'm trying," I said finally. "To be present, to be enough." He looked at me, puzzled. "You are." "No," I said softly. "I'm here, but I'm not in this house." "Not really." He frowned. "You feel far away." I nodded. "Because I am." He reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. But I didn't lean in either. "I know it's not easy," he said. "I know we didn't start like others do. But we're making it work." "Are we?" I asked. He looked at me. "I feel like I stepped into someone else's life, Thomas. And no one told me I'm allowed to take off her coat." He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know you felt that way." "Because I didn't say it," I whispered. "And maybe." I was scared that saying it would make it real. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling fan spin in slow, hypnotic loops. I listened to Thomas breathe beside me, steady, familiar. And I asked myself, what do I want? Not as his wife. Not as Ella's stepmother. But as me. Anna. The woman before all this. I couldn't remember. The next day, I stood in the hallway where Julia's books still lived. I touched their spines. Ran my finger along the dustless shelf. Then I did something I hadn't dared before. I moved them. Gently. Carefully. But I moved them. Made room for my own books. A novel I loved. A poetry collection I never finished. A framed photo of me, laughing, sunlit, taken by a friend who once said I looked like joy. It wasn't much. But it was mine. And for once, this house held something of me that wasn't borrowed. Ella noticed. That evening, she stood in the hallway, staring at the shelf. "Where's Mommy's books?" she asked. "They're still here," I said, pointing. "Why did you move them?" I crouched down. "Because I live here too, sweetheart." She didn't speak. Just blinked. Then quietly said, "I don't want her to disappear." My throat tightened. "She never will," I said, "not for you." "Will you?" she asked. And I froze. Because I didn't know how to answer that. I went to bed early that night. Not because I was tired, but because I couldn't carry the weight of being so many things to everyone, while still searching for who I was under all of it. Thomas came in later. He placed a cup of tea on the nightstand. Chamomile. Same as always. Same as before. I reached for his hand as he turned to go. "I need space," I said. He paused. "What kind of space?" "The kind where I can remember who I am. Not just who I became when I moved into this house." He sat on the edge of the bed. "Are you leaving?" I shook my head. "No. But I might need a few days. Alone. Somewhere that doesn't remember her, or me." He nodded slowly. "If that's what you need." There was no anger in his voice. Just fatigue. Like he too was tired of pretending everything fit perfectly. The next morning, I packed a small bag. Not out of drama. Out of need. I kissed Ella on the forehead while she slept. Whispered, "I love you," even if she wouldn't hear it. And I left. I didn't go far. Just 2 hours away, a coastal town with more seagulls than people. And salty air that stuck to your skin like memory. I checked into a small and above a bakery. The owner handed me a brass key and said, "Room 3 gets the best sunrise." I thanked her and went upstairs. When I opened the door, I exhaled like I hadn't in weeks. The room was simple, white walls, faded blue curtains, a bed that didn't belong to anyone before me. And that, somehow, was the most precious thing I'd felt in years. I didn't plan my days. I let them happen. Long walks on the empty beach. Breakfast alone with a book I hadn't touched in months. Moments of stillness that weren't filled with someone else's grief. For once, I didn't have to tiptoe around a memory. No one here had known Julia. No one here looked at me like I was second. I was just a woman, in a sweater too big, holding coffee too hot, trying to breathe her own name back into existence. One morning, I met an older woman named Elise. We were seated beside each other at the cafe, both reading in silence. She looked over and smiled. "You've got the eyes of someone who's remembering who she was." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She shrugged, still smiling. "I've been that woman. You don't look lost. You look unfinished." I laughed, caught off guard. "That's probably true." She nodded, sipped her tea, and said, "Keep going, she's still in there, whoever she is." Then she returned to her book. That night, I stood on the balcony and watched the moon pull at the tide. I thought about who I was before Thomas, before Ella, before Julia's perfume on curtain hems. I remembered the girl who loved thunderstorms, who painted poorly but passionately, who once backpacked alone across 3 countries just because she could. She hadn't been gone. She'd just been muted. I whispered aloud, "I miss you." And in the silence that followed, I felt her return, not fully, but enough to recognize the edges of her laughter. I stayed 4 days. 4 days of unclaimed air. Of mornings that didn't begin with someone else's rituals. Of nights that didn't end with another woman's shadow at the foot of the bed. On the 5th morning, I packed slowly. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. I was returning, but this time, with myself. When I came home, Thomas was waiting at the door. He looked tired, but his eyes softened when he saw me. "You okay?" he asked. "I think I am," I said. We didn't hug right away. Didn't kiss. We just stood there, two people who had walked to the edge of something, and returned not as one, but not entirely apart either. Later that night, he asked, "Did you find what you were looking for?" I shook my head. I wasn't looking, I was remembering. Remembering what? I paused. That I exist. He nodded. "I'm sorry if I made you feel like you didn't." "It wasn't just you," I said. "It was everything." In the morning, Ella came into the kitchen and wrapped her arms around my waist. It was the first time she'd initiated it. "I missed you," she said. "I missed you too," I whispered, resting my hand on her hair. And in that small moment, there was no Julia. No memory standing between us. Just a girl and a woman, trying to meet each other honestly. I started with the kitchen. Not to erase her, but to breathe myself into the space where I spent the most time. New mugs. New dish towels. A ceramic fruit bowl I found at a second-hand market, cracked in one corner, but painted with little sunflowers. I changed the spice shelf. Moved the cinnamon. Rearranged the jars. Alphabetized everything. Not because it mattered, but because I needed something to be mine. Thomas noticed, of course. He walked in that evening, paused at the open shelves, and smiled. "Paprika on the top shelf, that's bold." I shrugged, eyelid dangerously. He laughed. And for the first time in weeks, we laughed together, not because something was funny, but because it felt safe to do so. Ella peeked around the corner later, watching me stir pasta sauce. "You moved the salt," she said. I did. A pause. I liked where it was. I turned, met her gaze. "Would you help me pick a better spot?" Her face lit up, just slightly, and we stood side by side, reorganizing a shelf that had been untouched for 3 years. Small thing. Big shift. That weekend, I asked if we could paint the living room. "I just want it brighter," I said, "more light." Thomas hesitated. His eyes scanned the soft green walls Julia had chosen years ago. Then he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." We spent the afternoon dipping brushes, listening to music, splashing white across old color. Ella helped for a while, until she got bored and went to play. But Thomas stayed. He looked at me as I traced a line of paint along the window frame and said, "You look lighter." I smiled. "Maybe I am." That night, after Ella was asleep, we sat on the porch again, like we used to. No tea. No tension. Just cool air and quiet stars. "I want to say something," Thomas said. I nodded. "You were right, before, when you said we made space for her, but not for you." He paused. "I think I was afraid that if I let go of too much, I'd lose her completely." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me. And now, I think I want to know what it feels like to fully love again. I didn't answer. I just reached for his hand. But healing isn't linear. And houses, like hearts, have rooms you forget to open until they echo again. A week later, I found a package on the doorstep. No note. No label. Just a white box tied with ribbon. I brought it inside, opened it carefully. Inside, a photo album. Leather bound. Heavy. On the front, our beginning. I didn't recognize it. Neither did Thomas. Until we opened it together and saw the first photo. Julia. In a hospital bed. Holding Ella for the first time. Tears welled instantly in Thomas's eyes. He turned the pages slowly. Page after page of a life I was not part of. Ella's first smile. Julia kissing her toes. A family, complete and whole, before me. Where did this come from? I whispered. Thomas shook his head. Her sister, maybe, she mentioned something years ago. I closed the album. Not out of anger, but because my hands had started to tremble. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Thomas came in, saw me there, and didn't speak. He just sat beside me. I'm not angry, I said, I don't know how to hold both truths. He looked confused. That she was loved. And that I need to be, too. His voice was quiet. You are. I know, I said, but sometimes I still feel like the housekeeper of your memory. He didn't defend. Didn't explain. He just put his hand on my back. And left it there. Warm. Steady. Like maybe he was learning that loving me wouldn't mean forgetting her. It started with a squeaky hinge. I went down to the basement looking for an old fan. And opened a cabinet I'd never noticed before. Inside, a cardboard box. Untouched. Taped once, years ago, and never opened again. On the lid, written in black marker. Julia's, do not throw away. I paused. I didn't intend to open it. But the house was silent. Thomas and Ella were gone for the afternoon. And something about that handwriting felt like a whisper. Just once, see me. Inside were notebooks. Dozens. All sizes. Some full, others barely touched. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and opened one at random. A grocery list. A sketch of a garden layout. A paragraph about postpartum insomnia. I opened another. I love him, but some days, I miss myself. My breath caught. Not because it hurt, but because it sounded like me. She hadn't just been the first wife. She had been a woman. With thoughts that never made it into photographs. With doubts. With fatigue. With longing. There was no poetry. No grand declarations. Just honesty. And for the first time, I didn't see her as someone to compete with. I saw her as someone who had once stood exactly where I stood, elbows deep in dishes, wondering if she still existed outside of being needed. One small journal was labeled "Letters I Never Gave Him." I hesitated, fingers trembling. Then opened to the first page. Thomas, today I wanted to scream. Not because of you, but because I miss being touched like I'm not just tired. I love you. But sometimes love feels like another mouth to feed. I closed the notebook. Held it against my chest. And cried. Not for him. Not for her. For me. Because in her quiet scribbles, I saw the weight I'd been carrying, and the weight she had once carried too. We had never met. But we had spoken the same language. That evening, I sat on the porch, journal in my lap. Thomas joined me, wiping his hands on a towel. You look like you've seen something. I smiled, soft. I met her. He blinked. Who? Julia, through her writing. He froze. You read her journals? I didn't mean to, but yes, some. He looked uneasy. I didn't even know they were down there. I think she meant them for herself. Then I looked at him. And maybe, for someone like me. He didn't answer right away. Just sat beside me, staring out at the trees. What did she say? She loved you, I said. But she was also tired, human, trying. He nodded slowly. Then asked, how did that make you feel? I thought for a long moment. Relieved. And sad. And not so alone. I didn't tell Ella about the box. Not yet. But a few days later, she came to me with a notebook in her hand. Pink, glittery, her own. I'm writing a story, she said proudly. What's it about? She beamed. A girl who grows flowers where no one else can. I smiled. That sounds beautiful. She looked at me shyly. Want to read it when I'm done? My heart swelled. Yes, I'd love to. She nodded, then ran off, braids bouncing, feet light. And in that moment, I felt something crack open. Not grief. Not guilt. Just possibility. Later that night, I placed one of Julia's journals back on the shelf. Not hidden. Not on display. Just there. Among my own books. Between pages that belonged to both of us. It was Thomas's idea. There's a lake I used to go to, he said one morning. Quiet, beautiful, I think you'd love it. I smiled. Did you go there with her? He didn't flinch. Yes, but I want to go there with you now. I want us to have it too. And that mattered. Not because I wanted to rewrite his past, but because he wanted to share the present. We packed light. Snacks, sunscreen, a cooler, books. Ella brought her sketchpad. It was warm, late summer, the kind of day that sticks to your skin like honey. The lake was small, surrounded by pines. There was a wooden dock and a single canoe bobbing beside it. When we arrived, Thomas looked at me and said, "This is the first time it feels different." Because of me? He shook his head gently. Because of us. Ella ran ahead, laughing. I sat beneath a tree, eyes closed, listening to the water lap against the shore. For a while, I forgot the heaviness. I forgot who came before, who might come after. I was simply here. And it felt good. Later, Ella sat beside me, swinging her legs, sketchpad on her knees. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. She hesitated. Do you ever wish I was yours? My breath caught. She didn't look at me. She just kept drawing, a lopsided pine tree. I mean, from the beginning, she added. I turned to her, heart in my throat. I don't wish anything about you was different, Ella. You're exactly who you're meant to be. She was quiet. Then, sometimes I forget Mommy's voice. Tears pricked at the edge of my vision. And that makes me feel bad. I reached for her hand. It's okay to forget some things, and it's okay to remember others. A pause. Do you remember her? She asked. I smiled. I never met her, but I think I know her better than some people who did. Ella finally looked at me. Do you talk to her, like in your head? I nodded. Sometimes, especially when I don't know what to do. She nodded too. Me too. We sat in silence. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel like a guest in her story. I felt like a chapter. One she had chosen to write. That evening, after dinner, Thomas and I watched the sunset from the dock. He handed me a mug of wine. "I saw the two of you today," he said. I smiled. She asked if I wished she was mine. His eyes widened. "What did you say?" "That I don't wish anything about her was different." He nodded. "She's growing up. And I'm finally showing up," I whispered. He turned to me. "You were always here." "But I was always careful," I said. "Not to touch too much. Not to take too much space." He looked down. "I think I needed that, at first, but now." He looked back up. "I want you to leave fingerprints." That night, in the cabin, we made love with the lights on. No shadows. No hesitation. Just skin and breath and quiet yes. And afterward, when his hand rested on my hip and I curled into him, I realized this life was becoming mine, too. Not inherited. Not borrowed. Shared. It arrived 2 days after we came home. An envelope, cream-colored, with my name in block letters. Anna. No return address. Just neat handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully. Inside, a single page. And a name at the bottom I hadn't heard in months. Claire. Julia's sister. Anna. We've never really spoken. Not truly. Just polite words at birthdays and school events. I wasn't sure if I had the right to write to you. But lately, I've felt something I can't explain, and I think it's time. At first, I didn't like you. I won't pretend. You moved into a space I still saw as hers. You wore her apron once. You repainted her walls. And I hated you for that. But then I watched you at Ella's school play last month. How you stood in the back, quiet, letting Thomas clap the loudest. How you waited until no one was looking to hug Ella, not for show, but for her. And I realized, you are not trying to be Julia. You are just trying to love what's been left behind. I paused. My fingers tightened around the page. The breath in my lungs stuck for a beat too long. Then I kept reading. I used to think no one could live in her place. That anyone who tried would be an intruder. But now I understand. There is no such thing as replacing someone like her. And you never tried to. You've been kind. And patient. And invisible, in ways no one should have to be. I want you to know, she would have seen that. Julia was many things. But she wasn't threatened by women who carried light. I think she would have liked you. I think, in some quiet way, she might have even whispered, "It's okay." So I'll say it, since she can't. It's okay to love them. It's okay to stay. It's okay to let the house become yours. It's okay to let them become yours. Because you've earned that. Every quiet, painful inch. Claire. I sat on the edge of the couch. Letter in my lap. Tears streaming silently. Not from pain. From release. From finally hearing what no one had ever said out loud. You're not unwelcome. You're not just surviving. You belong. Later that night, I showed Thomas the letter. He read it in silence. Then looked at me, eyes shining. "She never talks like this," he said. "I know." He folded the letter. Set it down gently on the table. Then pulled me close and said, "She's right, you know. I just didn't know how to tell you." I didn't frame the letter. Didn't save it in a special box. I tucked it into a drawer in the hallway. With the mismatched keys. Old batteries. And things that don't look valuable, but somehow are. The next morning, I found Ella sitting by the bookshelf. She was holding one of Julia's old notebooks, the small pink one with dried flowers pressed between the pages. "Did you read Mommy's writing?" she asked. I did. Did it make you cry? I smiled. A little. Me too. She looked at me, then said, "Sometimes I think you and Mommy would have been friends." I nodded. I think so too. Then she stood, took my hand, and said, "Can you make pancakes now? Like yours, not hers." And I knew then, without a doubt, we were writing a different story. Not better, not cleaner, but ours. It didn't happen overnight. Nothing ever does. But slowly, quietly, the house changed. Not in dramatic ways. Not in the kind you photograph for proof. But in texture. In sound. In the way the floor creaked differently beneath barefoot mornings. In the way Ella laughed louder in the hallway. In the way Thomas started whistling again while making coffee. Something shifted. And this time, it didn't feel like I was trespassing. It felt like we had built something new, on the bones of what once was. I painted the door yellow. A small act. An intentional one. It made the neighbors blink. Made Ella grin. And Thomas just said, "It's brighter." Yes. So was I. One afternoon, I caught Ella humming while coloring. It wasn't a song I knew. When I asked, she said, "It's the one you sing when you think I'm not listening." I didn't realize I'd been singing at all. She tilted her head. "I like it better than the old lullaby." I kissed the top of her head. And let myself feel the joy, unfiltered. Because it was okay to be chosen. Even if it took time. Even if it wasn't first. We planted flowers in the front yard that spring. Ella chose wild colors, poppies, marigolds, violets. Thomas joked, Julia liked lilies. Ella shrugged. But these are Anna's. He looked at me. Smiled. And for the first time, we weren't speaking in comparison. We were speaking in now. On what would have been Julia's birthday, I lit a candle in the kitchen. Not out of grief. Out of gratitude. I didn't speak. Didn't pray. I just stood there. Hands resting on the counter. And let the flame flicker for everything she'd left behind. Not just Ella. Not just Thomas. But space. Space that once felt sacred and off limits. But had become a garden again. For all of us. That night, Thomas touched my face as we lay in bed. "You changed everything," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "I just stayed long enough to let things change." He nodded. "Thank you for staying." "I didn't stay," I said. "I finally arrived." Ella made a drawing a few weeks later. 4 stick figures. Smiling. Holding hands. And in her scrawled writing at the top, "My family." No names. No explanations. Just us. Whole. Messy. True. The house is not Julia's anymore. It's not mine either. It's ours. Built from memory. From grief. From quiet forgiveness. From late-night conversations and burnt toast and Saturday mornings in pajamas. From a man who learned to love twice. A child who learned to trust again. And a woman who dared to stay, not to replace anyone, but to become herself again.